I'm Dr Suzy Green. I'm the CEO and founder of the Positivity Institute. We're really passionate about creating flourishing lives, flourishing workplaces and a flourishing world. I created the program to address three key issues at work. The first one is the increasing rates of mental illness and psychological distress. The second one is the focus on the proactive enhancement of well-being in the workplace. And the third one is capability building, and not just for leaders, for everybody at work. So I spent the early part of my career working as a clinical psychologist, treating psychological disorders after the curveballs had hit. I also spent many years working as an executive coach, working with senior leaders to help them be the best that they could be. So unless you've been fortunate enough to work with a clinical psychologist or an executive coach or a great sports coach, the majority of people in our community and in our workplaces have never had access to these skills. These same life skills that are now starting to be taught to children at school.
Welcome everyone to the exciting launch of the Positivity Institute's New Potential Plus digital workplace programme. My name's Bob Barbour and I'm going to host the session for the next 60 minutes. And I'm going to introduce Dr Suzy Green, who's the founder and creator of this programme, in a few minutes. But just before we do that, just a quick bit of housekeeping. We, of course, would really like to hear your views and any questions you might have. And what we have is the opportunity for those to be addressed at the end of the session. But it's really important, if you think of a question, that you type it into the chat box as soon as you think about it so that we can capture it. And then Suzy and I will do our best to address that at the end of the session. And any questions we don't get to, we will address afterwards. So first of all, let me just introduce myself briefly, because you're probably wondering who on earth's he. So my name is Bob Barbour. I've been working in the field of people and culture for several decades, far too many to mention. And for the last couple or so, I've been really passionate about culture and the role that that plays. And I've been doing this within Australia, so I've been based in Australia for the last 28 years or so. But I have experience working with a range of companies and countries around the world in this field. I'm really interested in culture because of the connections that it has to the marketplace success outcomes that organisations have, and particularly interested in every element that goes towards shaping culture, and that gets us back to the individual piece. And at Lion, we focused on making sure that we aligned all those elements, going from individual through the overall culture to ultimately the desirable external outcomes that we wanted. And we did that for about 20 years or so, so I think quite a leading edge exponent of that. Having left Lion some 3 years ago, finally, I decided I'd really like to carry on doing that kind of work, but actually do it with a range of other organisations. So through Stagira Consulting, I've had the great pleasure of working with a range of companies across very different industrial sectors and helping them to transform themselves and grow the people within their organisations. And we picked Stagira, by the way, as the name, because that's the birthplace of Aristotle. And he, as I'm sure you all know, is an ancient Greek philosopher who taught, amongst other things, and amongst other people, Alexander the Great, the wisdom of being adaptive in our thinking. And I'm sure you would agree that there's never been a time more than now when being really flexible and adaptive in our thinking is really important. So it's through this work that I got to know Suzy. And that was probably about 14, 15 years ago, and through work that she did with Lion in particular. And I'd like Suzy to introduce herself now and maybe talk a little bit about her programme.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob, for joining us today and hosting the session. I'm Dr Suzy Green, for those that have never met me before. Thank you so much for joining us for the launch. I'm really excited about this project. It really is culmination, I would say, of my 20 years of practice as a psychologist. So my background is I'm a clinical psychologist, and I spent the early part of my career really helping people that were quite psychiatrically unwell, very mentally ill. And after a couple of years myself, I sort of worked out that it possibly wasn't the best use of my strengths. And so I moved into the area of coaching psychology, and I was really fortunate to do a world first study, a randomised controlled trial on evidence-based coaching as a mental health prevention intervention, which we were actually able to show that helping people to clarify their values and then goals that were aligned to their values and making progress towards those personally meaningful goals on a daily basis actually did lead to not only increased levels of goal attainment by working with a coach, but also increased levels of psychological and subjective well-being. So so I've really worked across the spectrum, and I then spent 10 years working as an executive coach, and that's where I met you through Lion, coached some wonderful leaders at Lion. And I guess in many ways I was really fortunate to work with Lion because Bob and a number of your team had actually attended my class at Sydney University on applied positive psychology, and you were doing the coaching masters, and you had lionised a lot of the tools and the research that we were teaching and really brought them to life in a very practical way at Lion. And we are talking 14, 15 years ago, so I have to say very much ahead of the curve. We still don't see a large amount of organisations doing that even today. And so I was really lucky as a coach to work with people that were already equipped on these skills. Whereas for the majority of our coaching engagements today, and I have a team of about 15 associates across Australia and into New Zealand, they would tell you that most of the coaches are not equipped, don't have these basic psychological skills that I spent years teaching people very reactively after they'd suffered, a distress or a derailer, or I was using in a peak performance setting. So I guess my argument has been, unless you've been fortunate enough to consult with a psychologist around a mental health issue, counselling issue, or whether you've been fortunate to work with a great executive coach or great sports coach, but the majority of people in our communities have never had these access to these skills. And of course, they're all based on science. It's something that I'm absolutely passionate about. I taught it for 10 years. I still have honorary positions, honorary visiting professor at the University of East London, and also I have an honorary position at Melbourne University where the Masters runs, the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology. So everything, rest assured, everything in the program is underpinned by science.
It's really important, I feel, that it's evidence-based, but often with science, it can be a bit technical. How do you make it user-friendly?
I know, well, I've worked really hard at that, Bob, over the years, and a lot of people do say, Suzy, you are a frustrated academic, and I love the science, but we have had feedback over the years that it needs to be much more practical, and we've worked very hard, not just myself but my team, on, I guess, lionising them in your sense, but helping organisations really make them come to life so that they are very practical tools that can be used.
That's the basis of this programme we're here to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll give a snapshot of the science, but then we've got tools that you can actually use to help develop those psychological capabilities.
Would you like to talk a bit more about the programme then?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is based on my 6M model, which hopefully will come up on the screen in a moment. And it really came about when I was asked by a school principal, and some people listening today may be aware that we do quite a bit of work in the field of positive education. And a principal asked me, Suzy, if you had a wish for a year 12 student or a senior high school student walking out our gates for the very last time, what key psychological skills would you want for that student going out into the VUCA world? And so I went away, I reflected on that question, thought about what I knew from the science, but more so what I knew from working with hundreds of people clinically and coaching, and I thought about what are those key skills, psych skills that have really made a difference to my life and to my client's life. And amazingly, Bob, they all started with M. So I did.
Very convenient.
Very convenient. And look, creativity is one of my top strengths. So I did take a little bit of creative license. So the first one is mood, where we talk about the full range of human emotions. We do focus in on the conscious cultivation of positive emotions, which is what positive psychology is renowned for. And we have significant amounts of research now to show that positive emotions don't just feel good, they affect how we function. They help us make better decisions. We have better relationships. There's a whole range of outcomes that are relevant to the workplace in being happier, if you like. So mood, then we look at motivation. So drawing on probably 40 years of research. There's textbook upon textbook about motivation, and I've really tried to pull out the key research around what makes for intrinsic motivation and how do we help ourselves and others become more intrinsically motivated. And then we move into might, and this is where I've taken the creative license. So strength, might, character strength we focus on. There are other approaches to strengths, but in the program I've focused in on character strength, which I think is really a wonderful basis to introduce strengths in a workplace. And it's also about virtue and virtuous organisational citizenship. So it's a lovely language and literacy to create around strengths. Then we move into meaning, and again, the research on meaning in the workplace has just, gone up in extensive amounts of research in the last 10 years, and we look at how we cultivate meaning in our own lives, and particularly around job crafting. How do we make our jobs, our role descriptions more meaningful? Then we move to mindfulness, which, as you would know, is a very hot topic right now, and we look at the science behind that and some really practical strategies on everyday mindfulness. Absolutely, we would recommend a personal daily practice, but we also introduce some really simple ways of bringing everyday mindfulness to life. And then we end on mindset, which is a large part of the program, but we really go out on mindset and sort of reiterate just how important it is, as you were saying before, about having an adaptive or a growth benefit type mindset. So not only how do I cultivate a growth mindset for my own performance and my teams, but in terms of a benefit mindset, how do we look to benefit others as part of that process, which is a really lovely way to approach it.
Okay. And who's the program designed for? Because often a lot of these very high-level programs are targeted at senior executives.
That's
and
it
seems like most people in the organisation don't actually get to experience them.
I know, everyone else seems to miss out, and look, most of our work is with leaders, senior leaders, and I guess that's where I started to discover, when I had some feedback from team leaders that were saying, this isn't just for us, this is for everybody, can't we take this out? And of course that can get costly when you're looking at small group workshops to scale up, if you like. So that's when I thought creating a digital program would be the way to go. So it really is for all staff, and ideally through teams. I'd love to see it rolled out through teams. I've created a team facilitation guide.
Why is that? Why through teams?
Because I think, as most people will be aware, there's a big focus on creating psychological safety now at the team level and the role of the leader. And I think we can do that through the 6Ms, through pretty much every aspect of those 6Ms will help build high quality connections and relationships which underpin psychological safety. But we also learn from each other when we're in a team or a group setting. So if I'm sharing my perspectives on the video content and somebody else hears it and thinks, oh, I've never thought about it from that way or that perspective before, we can start to really challenge our mindsets and collectively
go on the learning journey together.
Yeah. But I would love to see organisations roll it out for everybody, because we're really trying to create a psychological literacy, a wellbeing literacy. And we know there's some great research going on at the moment at Melbourne Uni around the power of literacy in actually changing culture. Because you'd know, Bob, from your work on culture, that it is the language that people are using that helps change the culture.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Bob, I've got a question for you now.
Right.
Are you up for it?
Yep.
So, you've been in HR, as you said, for many moons now. How do you see a program like Potential Plus being implemented or integrated with other L&D activities that might be on offer?
Yeah. I think that's a good question, because the key word is integrate. I think that's right. Rather than just pick it's another program I've discovered and I'm going to run it because it's the flavour of the month. I think that's not the right thing to do. You've got to think about where does it fit versus our overall strategy. And what you see on the screen at the moment is a model that we use at Stagira to really help organisations to think about their overall strategy for achieving cultural transformation. And I think it's core to what we do is what I would call people and culture practitioners or leaders. that we're really clear about what it is we do and how we add value to the organisation. And really, we only do two things at the end of the day, and there's a bit of a clue in the title, people and culture.
Yes.
So our job's primarily to attract, retain, develop great people, but that's not enough. You've got to have great people, of course. You then need to create an environment in which they flourish. And that ranges from creating an environment which is safe, which encourages them to achieve high levels of well-being, which also, though, encourages them to help others to achieve their goals, to work well together, to listen really well, to make suggestions, say what needs to be said, and to take risks in being creative. So all those kind of things add up to culture. And that's why I'm really passionate about culture. And so on the culture model, if we could go back one to the slide before, thank you. What you see here is you've got to start with the end in mind. So you've got to be really clear about marketplace success, whatever it is for your organisation, and be clear about what are all the things that deliver on that. And ultimately, it's a combination of these things being aligned. So the experience that your external stakeholders have as they interact with you needs to be really positive. That's based on the experience they have through the behaviours of your people and the products. And of course, the behaviours of your people come primarily from what's at the heart of this, which is organisational culture. And that's why you really need to focus on that. And what shapes culture is leaders and leaders' behaviour. And often the missing link is P&C practitioners think we're pretty good at focusing on measuring organisational culture now and doing something about it and leadership behaviour. We've started to get better at linking it forward into marketplace success, but we've not been too good on the very beginning of this process, which is individual mindset.
Right.
And that's where I think your programme comes in to be really valuable. It's like the missing link, although it's at the very beginning.
Yes.
How do you help people to be aware? Firstly, as you've said, be conscious about how they're feeling and thinking about things, and then be aware of the techniques and tools that can help them to change that.
Yes.
So this model focuses on achieving change at an overall organisational level. But if we move on to the next slide, then we obviously have to focus on individual change as well. So change only comes about when you take a whole systems approach, and you've got to change one person at a time. And this classic little model here says people won't know they need to change if they don't have any insight, they don't have any feedback. So organisations are usually pretty good at organising 360-degree feedback nowadays, which helps people to realise, hang on a minute, I need to be doing something different. They need to then really want to do it as well. That's the desire piece. That comes from coaching. So there's where you start to have a role for some of the positive psychology applications in helping people to think their way through to what goals, what change goals do they have. And ultimately, the area where people fall down most, where change often fails to actually materialise, is in that final bit there. That's really about sustaining the change, keeping it going. And the key there is the capacity to really recognise where you are in your change journey, recognise what kind of mindset, thinking behaviours is getting in the way, what kind of thinking traps might be halting us, slowing us down. And it's in that area there that I see the 6M model in particular playing a really key role in helping people and culture practitioners in particular understand what tools are available out there.
That's right.
That they need to be doing something in this area, because if they just give the feedback and do nothing, it probably won't work. If they give the feedback in coaching, there's a chance that a few people will change.
Yes.
If they do the feedback in coaching and address the need to build capacity for change, then you're much more likely to achieve your goals. So I think it fits perfectly with that.
Yeah, and in terms of the insight component, I have created a measure of psychological capability based on the 6Ms, which can be taken pre and post program. So you can gain some insight by taking that pre-assessment to see the areas of strength and the areas that you might want to particularly focus in on the program. And also when it comes to desire, the whole module or chapter on motivation definitely taps into that, because we're looking at what are the benefits, and we know from research that we won't make the changes we desire until the benefits outweigh the costs of desire.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got a whole module on that.
Yeah, I like in your modules, you've also got one on change, the trans-theoretical change model.
That's it.
Which people recognising where they are.
Absolutely.
And that they're actually stalled is really key, and then be able to figure out, well, why is that?
Exactly.
Because most people do stall. Most people don't achieve their change goals unless they're helped along the way through these 3 steps.
That's right. And I guess another reason why I think it's going to be helpful to run this in a team setting, because you can utilise a team coaching approach or even a co-coaching approach, which we would recommend to actually, move through this process of change.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I like about your programme as well is there's often, lots of interesting scientific and academic points. I love the fact that in the programme it's very practical. So day-to-day outline, we try to do is turn it into everyday language.
That's it.
And address that question. I got asked loads a long time ago by a team leader in a bottling line in one of our breweries at
Yes.
So it's all very interesting, all this stuff. But what do I do on a day-to-day basis, Bob? And
That's
I needed
it.
to help them understand that. So when you've got a series of simple tips about what you can do day-to-day, and you've got a bit of a programme where you can practice that for a week, say, and then you move on to the next bit of the programme, and a programme where you're doing it with others.
Definitely.
I think that all helps you to actually get it. And
Absolutely, and I think for me, again, one of the benefits of it is, as I said before, it's addressing mental health, well-being and capability. So it's not being rolled out, and I know things are changing, but there has been a stigma around attending. People will turn up for a positive psychology or a wellbeing program, but they might not turn up for a mental health, although thankfully that is changing now. But this program addresses all three of those, so I think that's a great benefit to it.
yes, I think what you're doing in particular is building those psychological resources, or fueling the tank, as we used to call it.
Absolutely.
Which is about, when you meet obstacles that are really hard. 'Cause at the end of the day, it takes a lot of courage and heart to change yourself.
Exactly.
And you need good resources to help you get that courage and heart. And so being able to figure out where you are right now and build high levels of, whether it's optimism or motivation or whatever it really, or hope, helps you on the way.
Yeah, and of course it's pitched at workplaces, but in the work that I've done in this space for many years, people realise it's about their whole lives. And in fact, we're seeing increasingly leaders sponsoring these programs and giving permission, if you like, for people to use this for their whole lives, professionally and personally. And I've had such wonderful feedback over the years of people that have said, I've been able to go home and talk to my kids about this, or my partner. And, as we were discussing, Bob, the reality is not all schools yet, but a lot of schools are now teaching these same psychological skills to children. So we are hearing in some of our workshops where people will say, oh yes, my 5-year-old came home and taught me about growth mindset last week. So we've got a scenario where kids know more than adults. So we've got a bit of catch up to play here too.
Yeah, I've heard those comments as well. Let me ask you a question then. Could you maybe go through in a bit more detail, how exactly does the programme work? And how much does it cost, is what everybody wants to know as well.
Absolutely. So it's, as I mentioned, completely standalone digital program. There are 6 chapters, and there's an introduction and a conclusion. They're only very brief videos, but I think in total there's at least 2 hours worth, if not more, in total, but they're broken up into very brief videos, which I think, again, is going to be one of the benefits of doing the program. There are, as we've mentioned before, a lot of exercises and activities. There's reading for those that like a bit more of an academic bent. There is certainly some reading, but there's also great videos that I've secured, additional videos if you want to learn more about some of the topics. As I mentioned, it can be done individually. And it starts at $330 for an individual, which is very reasonably priced. I've done my sort of homework in the market. It's very competitive price, and particularly the quality of the program. And then we have a corporate and an enterprise offering. So corporate's up to 25, and there is it drops, I think, down to 300 per person at 25, under 25, and then the enterprise is over 25, and there are significant reductions again the more people that go through it. But really, I think it's very reasonably priced compared to, I guess, other programs, or having an external consultant come in and run these face-to-face as well.
And of course, in the current environment, we find a lot of people working from home.
Yes.
So is it easy to access?
Absolutely, yeah. The platform, we'll put the details up today, but it's on our website now, so you can go and get a sense of what the platform looks like. And I think we've got some footage of it today as well that hopefully people can see. It's very user-friendly. We've beta tested it. We've had great feedback on it. We've actually taken that feedback on board and we've improved it, which is great. And I guess the other thing I wanted to say is that because we, as you know, do a lot of coaching work as well, leadership coaching work, I think it's a fantastic program to run perhaps even a coaching engagement, because what we're finding, as I mentioned before, is a lot of the coachees that we're working with don't actually have these basic psychological skills. So the coaches are really trying to teach and coach in a coaching session, which is not the ideal. I mean, psychoeducation has always been a part of coaching, but I think if you can combine the program with post-coaching, it's going to also help people to take that content and then personally and very meaningfully apply it in terms of the goals that they're pursuing. So I think that's a real benefit for it, of the program. And the other thing is the measurement piece. So as I mentioned, I've created a measure of psychological capability which can be taken pre and post, and you can get those results. You can also get group report, a team report, where the data would be anonymously collated, and you can see how the team has gone over a period of 2 or 3 months, if you like, to see the impact of the program on psychological capability.
Okay, great.
I think they were the main things.
I think we might have some questions. Here we go. So the first question you can see up on the screen, and if you have any others, please shoot them through at the moment, is how do you sell this concept, this idea, based on the pricing you just talked about, to some of the more commercially orientated people in an organisation? Now, perhaps I should have a go at
I think you should.
answering that, because I've had this experience many times. And I think the answer to that is you've got to make a business case at the end of the day, and you've got to sell why it's a good thing to do. And that means really joining up the dots for people, so connecting in the same way that the alignment models that I showed you earlier on demonstrate what you need to do to get marketplace success. You need to show where these modules fit, and they fit really clearly, for example, in that mindset piece, which then produces people who behave much more constructively, that ultimately delivers fantastic stakeholder experience.
Exactly.
And as a result, those people do business with you. And by way of illustration, at Lion we used to measure customer engagement as part of one of those steps. And what we discovered is nothing that's really earth-shattering, I'd say, at the end of the day, but it's really important to remind people. And that is those customers who are highly engaged, so really trusted your organisation as a business partner to do business with, and would want to do repeat business with you and would recommend you to other people, did a lot more business with you than those that didn't. And that the key thing that really drove that was the behaviour, the experience as they interacted with you. So did you do what you said you were going to do? Did you really listen and understand their needs? Did you help them to achieve their goals? Did you bring new ideas and suggestions to help them grow their business? All of those things reflect a really positive, constructive culture in which people are behaving well, and yet you can still get a tangible measure of whether or not a customer's engagement, and you can see how profitable they are, and they are much more profitable than those that are not engaged.
Yes.
So I think that's the kind of result you'd hope to have, but it's drawing that line to help people across the organisation understand it.
Definitely.
Is really key to building that case. And therefore it becomes an investment. It's what I used to tell the CFOs I work with.
Right.
Not a cost.
Yes.
Put it on a different line. They were never entirely persuaded of this, but
it does pay off in the long run.
That, when you do that, then leaders across the organisation became passionate advocates because they could see the benefits themselves.
Yes.
And actually, the great thing about all of these initiatives is really not just for the organisation, it's for the individuals.
Yes.
So it really helps individuals to flourish in their whole life, not just at work.
That's right.
And they get that as well. So all of the, hard-headed commercial people really understand this is really good to do.
Absolutely.
And actually, I found them to be as big as advocates for it as anybody else, I have to say.
Absolutely. And as much as the program is focused on your individual development of psychological capability, it's absolutely about those skills absolutely impact on our capacity to build positive relationships with people. And we know from the research that out of all of the factors that impact on our well-being, it's our relationships. So these are basic foundational skills to build those positive relationships as well. And I guess from an academic perspective, there is a huge amount of research that's been conducted, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years, out of primarily the work of the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, that has the Centre for Positive Workplaces. You can go and spend a whole day on that website,
right.
and there's a very, very strong business case on what are known as positive workplace practices, and even a link to the bottom line and around organisational effectiveness. So there's a very strong scientific case. So I usually come hard down on what the science says, and I think complementing that with that commercial line of sight that you mentioned.
That's right. And business leaders like measuring things, so the more that you can demonstrate through measurement that things are changing, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have a second question here. Would the programme help when teams are going through restructures that include job losses?
Oh, absolutely. I would absolutely agree, yes, because, I mean, mindset immediately comes to mind, because mindset is very much about the types of beliefs and thoughts that you have, whether you're the person that has actually lost the job. And I coached a lot of people that had lost their jobs through the GFC. I was spending a lot of time doing that. But also, I guess, might, the area around strengths as well, helping people determine the best use of their strengths. And again, collectively as a team, how do we address these challenges? So I guess my suggestion would also be, if you've got a challenge that you're working on or a key objective that the team's working on, bring out the 6 M's, particularly after you've been through the training, and ask yourselves as a team, which of these skills is going to be really important for the challenge that we're facing right now. We need the mindfulness to be aware of the mindset. We need the might, as I said before, to play to our strengths when we're going through adversity, and we need to understand that it's perfectly normal to feel sad if you've lost a job, but there are things that you can do to also consciously cultivate those positive emotions to build some hope as well for the future. So I would say there's so much I could say about that.
Really get from what becomes a big problem-focused approach when you often first encounter the fact you've lost your job because you're in a bit of shock.
That's it.
How do I get into the solutions-focused side, which, as you said, all the things you just mentioned really help you.
Absolutely.
What will it look like if it's going well, and how do I get there quickly?
And the job crafting piece that falls under the meaning chapter may be for if there have been some restructures and people's job roles have changed, and perhaps we haven't got 100% autonomy over those job role changes. The job crafting component really helps you to have some control over things that you don't have control of in terms of the way that you're viewing your work, and whether there's opportunities for some task changes at all, or complementary role partnering with other people in the team. There's a lot that it can help with.
I like your idea as well about strengths activities, for example, because there's nothing like, whether it's strengths or just writing down all the big successes and things you've learned in your job. To take a bit of time to reflect on what do I know, what do I learn, what kind of skills have I developed. When people do that, they're often surprised by how much they have learned and achieved, and that really helps put them into a good position.
Absolutely.
Next question is, if an organisation is not able to offer the programme to everybody, which is probably quite a lot of organisations, where would be the best place to start, Suzy, you think?
Yeah, well, look, as you say, Bob, and I quote you often, the leaders are the levers of the organisation. So I guess your best investment would be with the leaders, and we also know in terms of coaching investments, my wonderful colleague Dr Sean O'Connor from the University of Sydney has done some great research on the coaching ripple effect, and we now also supporting Sean's research, we know that there is this social and emotional contagion effect. So if it's the leader that can initially learn these skills, and if there's not budget for everyone, he or she may then be able to, in a sense, teach those skills to their team as well. Yeah,
because the leaders touch everybody in the organisation, so they can be the channel to everybody else.
That's right.
This is definitely a question for you, Suzy. So would the programme be suitable for school students?
It is focused on the workplace. It possibly would work for a senior high school student, but I do have another program called the Positivity Prescription, which you can find out more information on the website. That might be a little bit better pitched, possibly, but please feel free to contact us, email us, and we can pass on information.
You've done many years of work with schools and education.
Lots of great work. I have another program with my colleague Daniela Falecki called Growing Mentally Tough Teens, and that's a curriculum that is being used in schools at the moment.
Right, okay. Another question here is, how do you operationalize this on a day-to-day basis? That sounds more like the kind of practical people and culture
It is.
type of question.
The lionizing that you mentioned
Let me
before.
have a go at this. I think it is a good question because you do have to translate it into day-to-day actions.
That's it.
That everybody knows what they have to do, and make it a simple skill that you can practice. So I think the key to that is to do a number of things. So firstly, a lot of it boils down to really good quality conversations and having those pretty regularly. So are you having one-on-ones with your people, and are you having them pretty regularly? And I've always advocated at least every month or 4 weeks or so. You should be having a good quality conversation. And it's amazing how many people don't, and how often they think the informal little chat around the coffee or water cooler is that good quality conversation, and it's not really.
No, that's right.
Good quality conversation is a two-way. How do you know the other person's got to say what they want to say? There's got to be a certain amount of privacy around it. It's then about skills as a leader in coaching, so building your skills, investing in skill building for leaders. All leaders need to be coaches. All leaders need to be skilled at giving feedback. You can learn these things. They're pretty simple techniques and processes to go about. That makes it useful. And lastly, there's a whole series of things you can do to reinforce the message by hardwiring the key message, and that's through reward and recognition processes. So how you pay people, how you hire people, how you promote people needs to send a consistent message around what's the ideal way of going about doing these things.
That's it. And another way that we recommend organisations approach, I guess, the implementation and strategically and ideally sustainably is through a very simple model, again created by one of my colleagues, Associate Professor Aaron Jardin from Melbourne Uni, is the me, we and us approach. So when you're learning, then this is largely an educational component with the practical activities. What can I do at the individual level? So that's what's in it for me. And everybody may apply this differently, you know, depending on which aspects of the program feel like they're a good fit. Then the we is at the leader and the team level. So what can we do at the team level? And we've got great examples of teams just very simply starting their team meetings with WWW, what's working well. And, you know, particularly when we've given them pages of potential initiatives that they could take, and something as simple as just starting a team meeting with what's working well allows people to refocus their attention mindfully. And we know we have the negativity bias, so we tend to generally focus on what's not working well. Mindfully focus in on what's working well. It also gives people in teams to an opportunity to express gratitude, and we know that gratitude is a core component in the program, and significant amounts of research on that as well. The strength spotting, another activity that's part of the program, is where when you're introducing people to character strengths is to do a little bit of strength spotting or secret admiring, if you like. And we have a task where you would anonymously observe someone in the team, and we don't know who's observing who, and then at the end of a period of time you would say, Bob, I've been observing you and I've seen that you have the character strength of leadership, and I observe that when you do this, this and this. So there's some great, we do give lots of ideas around initiatives to actually bring the content to life.
Yep. Pretty fundamental question here. So why should we focus on these areas? I assume that means the M's.
Absolutely. Well, I think I have fairly clearly articulated the reasons why I believe it's important. I do want to say that I think, if anything, COVID has really highlighted the mental health issues that we have in our community, in our society. In fact, World Health Organization are predicting that depression will be the largest leading burden of disease on our society by 2030.
Followed by anxiety.
Closely followed by anxiety. Yes. And so there's a significant mental health issue in our community. There is also increasing recognition from workplace health and safety, occupational health and safety concern that we need to minimise risks, psychosocial risks, and so we need to be much more proactive in equipping people with the skills to deal with the challenges such as COVID, but rest assured, COVID is not the first or will be the last of these curveballs to come. But we also know, and I'd love you to make a brief comment too, Bob, that it needs to come from both sides. So I absolutely, I guess as a practitioner, a clinician, know that we can, and I believe we should be teaching people these skills, but that's not the be-all and end-all. It's our context, our environment that also matters. And so...
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I would reiterate also some of the core reasons for doing it, which if you look at those models that I showed you earlier on, you need to not just focus on the overall system organisational strategy. If you just focus on that big picture, for example, on that model I didn't talk about it had core policies and guidelines and values and vision statements. They're all really important, but not enough. If you just do those things, it won't happen. If you don't also focus on helping individuals to change one person at a time, and we all have things we need to work on, then it won't happen. And that mindset element, which is really what we're talking about, which obviously begins with an M as well, and one of your M's, is really key in helping. The two things that are important about that, I think, are people need to recognise how they're feeling and thinking at any point in time. Otherwise, they can't apply skill in changing that. And if they don't do those two things, they'll fall into a trap of not changing.
Yes.
And not even recognising they're not changing because they're into a bit of a pre-contemplation state. So it's really important for organisational success that individuals flourish and do well, because when they do well, the organisation does well. And it's really important that we help people recognise what they're thinking right now and how they're feeling and how that might be getting in the way, and that not to worry, there's some fantastic evidence-based tools that are easy to apply that help you to reframe those things or just accept them and notice them, defuse them.
Absolutely. And I think, we often do get feedback around it's the system, like, sure, we can learn this stuff, but it's the system that's causing the issues. And we do know that there are certain systems organisations that don't actively support wellbeing. In fact, they actively undermine wellbeing.
Absolutely.
But I would say that if we're going to change systems, we need flourishing individuals to change systems.
Absolutely.
So we need both.
So it's good for organisations, good for individuals, and good for the community. Last question, and then we'll have to wrap up. So is there a recommended timeline to take the programme over duration?
Well, if you took a module, a chapter, there's 6 chapters, an intro and a conclusion, that would be 8 weeks to do it, but there would be absolutely nothing wrong with spreading it out, doing it every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I wouldn't spread it out too much because you want to keep a bit of momentum happening. So that would be my recommendation. And then ideally having some touch points, maybe 3 months and 6 months, just make sure, or ensuring that you've actually, within your team meetings, have found ways to embed some of these key questions from the program. I was going to ask,
so once you've gone through it all, if in 3 months' time you want to go back and revisit a particular module, you can do that?
Access it. I think it's lifetime access to the modules, and the aim is to continually...
Lifetime access.
It is, to continually update the modules over time. So... that brings us to the end of
yes, we need to wrap up at this point.
Thank you so much, Bob, for hosting this. Really have appreciated, and I'm sure the audience also have appreciated your wealth of knowledge and experience in this field. I know I've certainly learned a lot over the years as well, particularly from a culture perspective. For anyone that wants to learn more, it's now live on our website under the Learn tab, so you can go straight to our website, thepositivityinstitute.com.au, and you will also receive a follow-up email from the team with a copy of the recording. I know there were many people that weren't able to join us live today, so the recording will be coming out, I believe, in the next day or so. And I do hope you enjoy Potential Plus, and it's beneficial to you, your team and your organisation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.